The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contests. And listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules First Federal Credit Union and Beehive Meals. We're hoping to talk to Andre Schlecht coming up here momentarily. He covers the Thunder for The Athletic, runs their podcast as well, covering the entire NBA. So excited to catch up with Andre potentially here in the next few moments as the Thunder go up 3-2 on the Indiana Pacers. And while these two teams are very different, I do think there are trends you can pull from some of them that we will see duplicated, replicated, mimicked in the NBA going forward. And I do think it is a more even distribution of your finances across your roster to have depth over exclusively star power at the top. So I think that is going to be something that you're going to see in the NBA over the next 4 years, 5 years, and maybe going into this offseason. Sounds like we won't be able to catch up with Andre, so we'll have to try another time with him. But I don't think you're necessarily going to, and this is where I think this gets really interesting for the Oklahoma City Thunder, invest exclusively at the top and then hope to fill out your roster with salary minimum players, minimum salary veterans who are ring chasing. There will still be those players. You know, Jeff Green signed with the Utah Jazz because the Jazz were good and didn't really have a lot of options elsewhere, and they thought they were going to give him an opportunity to play. It didn't work out, obviously, with Jeff Green, but you know, we've seen it across the league for a long time. Now you are seeing teams maybe invest in their top player, give him a max, super max, whatever you have to. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's worth it. You know, Tyrese Halliburton's worth his max contract. Pascal Siakam's worth a max contract. The hard part for OKC going forward is they are about to pay both Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. Both of those guys were drafted in the same year, so they're not staggered at all in when they get paid, and they are running out of time on their rookie contracts, and they're going to get paid, and because they have reached certain levels, they're going to get huge money. And they're going to get max contracts. And all of a sudden, you're going to have 3 max contracts at the top of your roster, which will hurt your depth. And they are a smaller market team. And maybe the owner will be willing to go into the luxury tax and over the tax aprons to keep the roster together for some time. But one of the things that I think is important to remember, and where this is different, Christian, than in years past, is that no longer is it just what's your stomach for paying the luxury tax. That's not the only damages you incur. You know, Joe Lacob, for the Golden State Warriors, was fine just paying $500 million for his rosters. He didn't care. The Warriors were winning lots of money or lots of championships. They were getting more expensive. There was the repeater tax, which is not really something you hear talked about anymore because it's not the most punitive assault that you get when you're over the first and second tax apron. Now, if you're over the second tax apron for so many times over a 4-year period, which is what happens when you sign multiple players to max contracts, and then you have Alex Caruso on a $20 million deal, or you have Isaiah Hartenstein on a $20 million deal, or you're going to have to pay Case and Wallace coming up here. All of these things that have allowed them to become a championship team. Once you are over the second apron for so many years consecutively, or on average over so many years, you start losing the value of your draft picks. Your own draft picks fall to the 30th pick in the draft. You can no longer sign those players. Second, it changes your ability to sign guys to veteran minimum contracts based on what they made in years past. You can't just get the guy who takes a huge discount to come and join your team. The league starts stepping in to prevent those types of things, so you can't continue to backfill your roster and backfill your roster and backfill your roster. Also, it makes it basically impossible to make trades. It's why the Suns are going to have a hard time trading Kevin Durant and why they can say, well, we want to get the absolute max that we can for him. And they can't, because you can't take back a single penny more than he makes, and they can't aggregate salaries to trade him, meaning they can't include, any other even good young players with Kevin Durant to get off of his contract to get somebody back who makes similar money and maybe a little bit more. They can't do that anymore. Or if you're trying to offload a bad contract for whatever cost, $20 million, $30 million, $5 million, it doesn't matter. You can't say, well, we want to get a $7 million player back, so we're going to combine the $5 million deal and a $2 million deal to take 7 back. You can't aggregate contracts once you're over the apron, the second salary cap apron, and that will come for the Oklahoma City Thunder. It inevitably just has to because they're going to pay these guys, and the league has a much harder salary cap. It's not a true salary cap. It's not a hard cap, but it's harder than it once was. And it will limit teams like OKC to be able to keep this roster together for 3, 4, 5 years, which is why I'm skeptical that this is the beginning of a dynasty, even though it might be a run of a team that can win 2 or 3 titles.
It's the cost of getting good. Yeah. And hopefully, in the Thunder's case, for them, it works out and they get a title or 2 or maybe even 3 out of it, because you talk about championship windows, but once you enter that second apron, that's it. And you kind of have to cut ties after that and get back out of it. So I did always think the dynasty talk was a bit premature anyways, because they hadn't won anything yet. I know they're currently on the brink of winning a title, so we'll see what happens there. But this is what the NBA wants. They want to get rid of these super teams, and having 3 players on max deals, that's a super team.
And don't get me wrong, what happened with Jason Tatum is awful. Right? The torn Achilles is the worst injury you can have in the NBA amongst injuries that players come back from. Of course, back, knee problems that are persistent are major and worse. But if you have the Achilles and it keeps you out for a year and then it takes you a year to get back, all of those things are extraordinarily difficult. It also puts the Celtics in a weirdly advantageous situation where they can pull the plug and close the championship window before they hit that run of being over the second apron too many years, where it hamstrings them and their ability to retool and rebuild. So they can now pull the plug essentially on next season, lose a Drew Holiday, lose a Kristaps Porzingis, take it easy with Jaylen Brown, make the playoffs or don't make the playoffs. Who cares? You know why you're not making the playoffs if you don't. You lost your best player to an Achilles injury. And you won a title a year and a half ago at that point. So you're still dealing with some equity that you've got, right? You've got championship equity, and you can let that coast for a while. And when Jason Tatum comes back, if Jaylen Brown's there, you're still going to be good, and those guys are very highly paid, but you only have 2 players on max contracts. And now you have the ability to go out and rebuild around them and retool without risking being over the tax apron for too many years and triggering all these different penalties that teams like OKC, now the Suns have certainly incurred, the Warriors have incurred, that you are trying to avoid running into. So that's where it gets interesting for the Celtics, and where a weird 1 or 2 year window where they're not competitive, at least title competitive, and just maxing out the books because they're telling themselves, well, our window's open, we got to keep paying whatever it costs, could be advantageous for the idea of a, dynasty. And maybe it looks more like a Spurs dynasty, whereas we had DJ on in the first segment, was not a dynasty where they won 4 in 6 years. They won in 99, they won in 05, they won in 09, and they won in 2015.
But they were always very good.
They were always good, but they won 5 championships in 6 finals appearances over a 16-year run with Tim Duncan. And you're not going to get that from the Celtics, but maybe they've already made 2 finals appearances. Remember, they lost to the Warriors in 2019. I believe it was.
They lost 2 finals, right? Didn't they lose to the Nuggets?
The Heat lost to the Nuggets.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So they go 2019. They go back and they win in 2023. And then maybe they're back in 2027. And maybe they have that type of, not dynasty, but elongated run where they are extraordinarily relevant. And when we look back, the way you can say, well, yeah, there were teams in the West during the Spurs run that were better. Shaq and Kobe won 3 titles. Kobe won 2 more titles in that stretch, sprinkled in between. But Tim Duncan and that Spurs team was kind of the class of the West for a decade and a half, because they were always a threat to go to the conference finals. And then once they were in the conference finals, they were a threat to win it all. And minus a couple of free throws from Kawhi Leonard and Manu Ginobili in that final series against the Heat that they lost, the only one Tim Duncan lost, they might have gone 6 for 6, a la Michael Jordan. So I think we can see that from some teams. And maybe that, I don't know if you can plan for that. I think that's what becomes difficult for OKC.
No, you can't. There's no way. But I like what OKC has done, and we were kind of talking off air about how many assets that they have stacked up. I mean, they had drafted Topic really high last year, and he was a non-factor.
He's been hurt all year, yeah, right. They knew he would not play this year, and they said we can be patient.
They've got another high pick this year. Depending on what happens with what the Jazz do next year, they could have a really high pick next year as well. So they still have an influx of assets coming in. The problem is those assets, I mean, they don't really matter if you still have those three guys left on your roster. I think they have enough of a life preserver to keep them afloat for maybe 2 or 3 more seasons.
Yeah.
And like you were saying with DJ, it's hard to win with young players.
Right.
And I think that's the hardest part. But it seems like they've done everything they can to kind of set them up for success under this second apron for at least another 2 or 3 years after this.
And I think maybe that's the point, is that they have basically set themselves up perfectly, right? They've got an MVP. They've got 2 great young players that they drafted that are on team control because they're going to hit restricted free agency to sign their max contracts. In fact, I think they already have. That will keep them in OKC. They have all these future draft assets.
Even if you lose Caruso and you lose Dort, you've still got guys like Wallace and all these other guys that they've drafted. They've hit all of their draft picks, it seems like.
You can step up and backfill with some of those guys. The flaw is the system still doesn't allow that to stay together permanently because you're going to lose Caruso and you're going to lose Hartenstein. At some point, they're going to get too expensive. Or you're going to lose Case and Wallace and Aaron Wiggins, these other guys who have stepped up and played the 6th guy, 7th guy, 8th guy that have stepped in on this roster. And then you're betting on your draft picks to step up and fill those roles. And as Austin Ainge said, and I think very astutely on DJ and PK 2 weeks ago, right after he got hired, it's like baseball. The absolute best drafter in the NBA hits 350, and the player that's borderline out of the league is hitting 250. Now, I know those are old stats. We don't use batting average anymore in baseball, but, you hit 300, you're going to be in the league forever. You hit 200, you're at the Mendoza line, and you're probably not sticking around. You have to hit on a certain amount of draft picks. And if averages catch up to OKC and they don't hit on, they've got the 15th pick and the 24th pick this year. They've got picks next year. If you have a lull where you don't get a Case and Wallace, now the nice thing is that they are drafting 15th. Or, I think they drafted Case and Wallace 10th overall. The higher you draft, the better you have an opportunity. They're not in the late 20s, which is where a lot of these teams run into issues, where they're trying to backfill with Jacques Vaughn, which is what the Jazz tried to do, and actually had some success drafting guys in the 20s that could step in and help their championship teams. But when you try and do that for too long, you make mistakes. And
you just have a lower success rate there. That's just math.
The hit rate doesn't work. Drafting in the 30s, if it was a good spot, everyone would want to draft in the 30s. No one wants to draft there because it's not a good pick. Inevitably, and probably sooner than we recognize, just because we've been conditioned for NBA teams having 6, 7, 8-year runs, it will catch up to OKC. And it will come apart. And that doesn't mean it's going to be a disaster or these guys aren't going to like each other. I think they like each other. I think it's a fun team to root for. I think Daigneault seems to have the right approach and the right attitude and the right personality to continue to run this team for a while. But it will catch up to them. And so I'm curious to see how this works because they might be the first team, assuming they stay healthy, and that's where it disqualifies the Celtics, I think, that really has to figure out, can you build a dynasty in the new NBA, and how do you navigate that? And nobody has ever maybe been more set up or better set up to maintain a championship window, even with restrictions, than where the Thunder are right now because of the control they have over their players and because of the draft picks. And like I said, I still don't know if it's possible. And it's going to take really impressive work from their front office to keep it together.
Yeah, and I think that going back to like blueprints and stuff, that's where it gets interesting too, and not just the on-the-court product, what are they doing to win, how will other teams try to emulate that, but how will other teams try to emulate these front office decisions and see all of this other stuff outside of what's actually played and seeing how they navigate. They're kind of the test subject or the lab rat, for this apron. Yeah.
They're 100% the test subject, and if it was anybody, maybe the Celtics were there already, and it would have been fascinating to see what the Celtics would have done had they repeated.
Because they were earlier.
They were earlier.
Right. A couple years earlier.
But had they won again, They were going to get expensive quicker than the Thunder are going to get because Kristaps is already up in the $40 million range, and Drew Holiday's up in that range as well, and Derek White's gotten paid, and I think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are 2 of the 5 highest paid players in the NBA right now. They're already getting paid. So what would they have done? Would they turn their back on their championship roster out of fear of the second apron?
We did see reports even before Tatum was hurt that they were thinking about shopping Kristaps and Drew Holiday.
Right, that this offseason was going to be tenuous for the Celtics regardless of what was going to happen. And also when Wick Grousbeck, their former owner who's in the process of selling the team right now, probably one of the reasons why he wanted to sell the team when he did is he realized this window's not just shutting, it's going to slam shut. And it's going to smash your fingers if they're still out there. So you've got to be careful to get out when you can get out. And I think that's why he chose to sell it when he did. And then the next governor and the next ownership group is going to have to come in and make those difficult decisions. OKC's probably going to face something similar. I don't think they're going to change ownership. Then again, when's the best time to sell a product? When it's at its best.
Sell high.
Sell high. And the Thunder are never going to be higher than this.
The Thunder bought low.
Really low. Moved. Now they're in a weird market, which I have been told. I've not been to OKC or been to Oklahoma City. I've been told it's the worst market in the NBA. It's the most boring town. It's a little bit of a weird environment inside the building, kind of, even though loud, notorious for at times piping in false sound into their building to keep it hyped up. Weird ownership historically, though good front offices, good head coaching. Traditionally, they've done a good job there, especially with their latest hire. But yeah, maybe this is a situation where an owner decides, hey, I don't want to keep trying to do this. I did this. I bought the team to do this one thing. I wanted to win a title. I wanted to show I could win a title, and now I want somebody else to have an opportunity on the ride. And maybe you try and sell then. I know, expect that to happen. But when you're talking about teams that are worth $3 to $6 billion and the getting is good, and if you believe there's a bubble right now, which I think some owners in the NBA believe there is a bubble, a la Mark Cuban selling the Dallas Mavericks when he did, and maybe Wick Grousbeck selling the Boston Celtics when he did, thinks these teams are at an all-time high. I don't know if this is sustainable, and also it's going to get really expensive for me to run this team. Maybe I sell now and I cash out and I live the rest of my life however I want with my $4, $5, $6, $7 billion. Maybe that happens. And then anytime there's that type of shakeup, as we've seen with the Utah Jazz, it takes a while for everything to settle.
Yeah, and I guess you never know what the rest of the league is going to do, right? Like we just saw with the Timberwolves and how big of a mess that sale was and that transaction. So if you have what looks like a really solid roster and you're bringing in titles and, you're a businessman, you're all about making money, there is no better time to make money.
And you also only set the bar for so long. Great teams in the NBA set the bar and everyone comes to meet it. And that's everywhere in sports, The most famous example is Tiger. Now, Tiger set such a high bar so far ahead of everybody else in golf because he worked out and because he hit more audacious shots and because he was more talented than everybody else and came in at a younger age doing it than we'd kind of historically seen. That it took 10 years for the league to catch up, for PGA to catch up. And then once they did, they caught up. And everyone hit the ball farther and took the types of gutsy shots and had the same preparation. And, Tiger just had so much natural skill on top of his hard work that it stayed together for a while. But then the injuries caught up to him. The same thing will happen to the Thunder, right? You set a new bar. As we are seeing with the Pacers right now, the bar is not so far ahead of the rest of the world. I mean, they needed a Game 7 to beat the Nuggets. They are not so far ahead of everybody else that they are going to be uncatchable by teams that make a tweak or two. And so I think that's also interesting, where, again, I don't think this is the Shaq and Kobe Lakers in 2000, where Shaq was so much better than everybody else in the NBA, and Kobe was better than we realized, that they weren't going to be a team that you could really mess with for a couple of years. And same with the Warriors. Their offense was such a juggernaut and so far ahead of where everyone else was doing as the NBA was evolving into a shooting league that nobody could catch up to them relatively quickly, and even then one LeBron James did in the middle of their run. Coming up next, talking about team building with Katie Benzan. She's the new general manager of the Salt Lake City Stars. What does she see in that role? And what does she see in the NBA draft? We'll talk about all of it coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Eric Weddle, kind enough to join us. You find out you're up for the College Football Hall of Fame. What's your first thought when you get that phone call?
Just humbled by it all, quite honestly. I think I have a real shot at the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't think I have any shot at the NFL Hall of Fame. So when I look at the College Football Hall of Fame, I think, yeah, I belong there at some point, whether it's now or 10 years from now. Like, I think I belong as one of the best college football players to have played the game. So whenever it happens, or if it happens, like, you guys know me, I live life to the fullest. It's not going to change whether I fall asleep at 10 o'clock or midnight. I got many other things that are on my mind. But it's really humbling and truly honored, obviously, and know that it took coaches, players, faculty, family, wife, kids. Like, it doesn't happen alone.
Catch Hanson Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. What's that? Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Very happy Tuesday to everybody out there. Excited to welcome in our next guest. She's a new general manager for the Salt Lake City Stars, who have some breaking news. It is Katie Benzan joining us. Katie, thank you for jumping on.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
First of all, congratulations on the new role. Can you explain some of the process of how you landed in Utah after a WNBA career and an extraordinarily successful college career?
Yes, I was trying to stay around basketball. I made a few calls, as many do. I was fortunate enough to get in touch with Justin Zanuck. I flew out to Vegas, and I interviewed with Justin and Danny Ainge at the time. And then the next thing I knew, I was moving out to Salt Lake City.
Well, it's been exciting to have you here, and it's been a cool influx of talent with the Salt Lake City Stars, including a big announcement today that you have the new head coach. It was announced that Steve Wojciechowski was going to be joining Will Hardy's staff full-time this year, and you've backfilled it with Rick Higgins, who is already had been a member of Will Hardy's staff and is now moving over to join the Stars as the head coach. What can you tell us about Rick?
I am extremely excited to work more closely with Rick this upcoming year. I just think he's going to bring a lot of NBA experience under fantastic coaches, including our own Will Hardy. But then just also, he has a knack to give tough love to players. And I just like how he can balance encouraging players to continue to grow and improve, but also keeping them accountable as they work on their weaknesses or how they try to strive to improve their game to reach that next step of their journey, wherever that may be.
So what are you looking for when it's a G League head coach? And that changes team to team. Obviously, every team has different goals for their developmental roster and their G League roster. So when you're looking at Rick and what you would like to accomplish with the Stars, is there a kind of set overall goal within the organization?
Definitely. As with any other organization, we would like to win a championship, but also we strive to help our players develop. And when going through this process and finding Rick, talking to Rick, going to grab coffee and lunch with him, he checked a lot of the boxes, or all of the boxes, I should say. He brings NBA experience, especially as this is my first year as GM. I really wanted someone who has been around the game a lot, been around the league a lot. And then just also player development. He has plenty of experience on the court with the guys, watching film with them, being able to push them outside of their comfort zone. And I'm just excited for this next step on his own journey.
So, Katie, you look at this Stars roster now, and you look at some of the talent that has been around the last few seasons, and they're always in flux. It's kind of the difficult part about G League rosters is there's continuity from one year to the next, but with two-way contracts, with the fact that you guys have a chance with the Jazz to bring in 4 new rookies this year, and anyone unsigned as an undrafted free agent who could come in and play. How do you view that at this point of the year of like, what do you want a roster to look like? Do you want it to reflect your NBA roster? Do you want it to serve a different function outside of winning a championship? I mean, how are you approaching that?
I am trying to build a team that is tough, that is smart, that is fun to play with, fun to watch. I think both Rick and I share similar values, that we ourselves as players, we were tough competitors. And so we want those players under our own belt. And that, of course, translates up to the Jazz with that toughness and competitiveness, that grit, but also just trying to get a lot of talented players, whether there are assignment players down with the Stars or two ways, whatever it may be. Like you said, the nature of the G League is so much change, but at the end of the day, I want to get the best, the toughest, the smartest, and then also just good teammates, good character kids who we all want to spend a lot of time with.
I think one thing people may not recognize about the G League, especially with how, well, at least my familiarity with what the Stars and the Jazz have done, is how much crossover there is between the staffs. And it's not just, oh, well, Will Hardy and some of the Jazz players go and sit and watch Stars games occasionally. It's, no, when Steve Wojciechowski had a day off, if there's such a thing, he was at Jazz games working as a coach. He was coming in and doing whatever he could. And same thing that we have seen recently with Marquise Newman, who had stepped up. And, yes, he is the general manager of the Stars, which is now your new role. But he'd also been helping as the coordinator of pro scouting and looking around the NBA and identifying talent. So how do you balance that job and inevitably what your work is going to have to be with the Utah Jazz as well?
Quite frankly, it's a lot of time management, but at the end of the day, it's basketball. So it's a lot of fun to go attend the Jazz games at night, the Stars games, and watching just college basketball, international basketball, other NBA games, other G League games. It's time consuming. It's a lot, but it's also a lot of fun to just continue to sharpen my own craft in finding and projecting players, whether that's for the G League or even during this time for the upcoming draft.
I know you were at the Combine this year, so you've done a lot of the scouting already with the Jazz and sitting alongside Danny Ainge, and now I'm sure getting to work with Austin Ainge, and as you mentioned, your history with Justin Zanuck. What have you learned in that process, moving on from your own playing career into a role as you are a basketball generalist? Is that what your initial title was with the Jazz, to what you're doing now? What have you picked up? What have you learned about analyzing players, analyzing talent, and how you do that at an NBA level?
So for me, I'm still working on this currently, but the biggest challenge at first was I was able to identify talent, whether they were 18 to 22, freshman to senior year in college. But now it's imagining them on a bigger NBA court or as a 27-year-old on a championship contending team. So for me, the biggest challenge is envisioning their development over the course of the next, whether it's 10 years, 7 years, whatever it may be, and also how they would fit under Coach Hardy's or under Rick's vision, and who and what type of people do we want to welcome inside this building.
One of the narratives about the NBA, and this has been going on for 20 years now, is that, the European influence of playing with the pass and shooting and floor spacing has really, changed the league. And it has. I think what people may miss out on that is that's what the women's game's been doing for an extraordinarily long time as well. If you've watched women's college basketball historically, it's been a lot of passing, it's been a lot of player movement, and some of that's because, there's not a lot of dunking, not a lot of people are finishing on top of the rim, but you're utilizing then floor spacing better, right? The three-point shot matters a whole lot. You're one of the greatest shooters who's truly ever lived and played basketball. I don't know if people know that about you, but in your college career, You shot, 40% on over 1,000 attempts? Like, the sample size was there. I would imagine what I'm saying, long-winded, is that what the league is doing right now is not outside of your wheelhouse of how you actually played in your career.
Well, I guess thank you. There are similar aspects of the game, regardless of gender. But, I mean, it is helpful that the NBA is bigger, stronger, longer, faster than college basketball. But I do think there are some similarities of just being a bit more, I guess, keen to the detail of the actions and the flare screens and the split actions. I think that's a very fun way to play, and to watch, quite honestly, just seeing everyone being involved. And I think that's what we're going to strive to do with the Stars, just having multiple weapons that on any given night, one can go off.
I'd be remiss to not ask about the draft, which is a week from tomorrow night. It's the 2-day draft. The first round is on Wednesday. The second round's on Thursday night. The Jazz have 4 picks: the 5th pick, the 21st pick, the 43rd pick, and the 53rd pick. Internally, how is the organization feeling about the draft? How are they feeling about the depth of the draft and the 5th overall pick?
We are excited for next week. We can't wait for it to come.
Katie, we appreciate you jumping on. Already answering questions like a pro. Good luck in your new role and with Coach Rick Higgins, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
There she is, Katie Benzan, giving us a breakdown on her new role, running the Salt Lake City Stars, what they're looking for, and what she's looking for, what she's learned in this role specifically. And it's the G League has become a proving ground not just for players, but a lot of coaches and front office members as well. Again, we mentioned Marquise Newman moving into his new role with the Utah Jazz as the director of pro scouting. He's been the general manager for the Stars, and he's been, looking around the NBA, and he looks around pros everywhere to make sure that the Jazz know who they think they could come in and help them. But sometimes they have to start with the Stars, and that's players on the court. But Marquise moves into that role, and Katie is being, is working now and training and learning how to do this at a bigger role. And inevitably, potentially to move on, not to belittle what she does with the Stars, but that's what head coaches are doing as well. Nick Nurse was a head coach in the G League and went on to win a championship. Dane Alt is a game away from winning a championship as the former Oklahoma City Blue head coach as well. Will Hardy was very close to becoming the Austin Toros head coach with the San Antonio Spurs and opted to just stick with the Greg Popovich staff on his bench. Quinn Snyder notoriously rebuilt his career as a coach with the Austin Toros. So if you are working through the G League in these roles, you are generally doing it with an opportunity to move up to the NBA. It's not just for the players on the court. So exciting to see where Katie goes in her career.
Yeah, it's developmental for everybody. The front office, the coaching staff. I really am fascinated by the relationship between, the Jazz and the Stars, the G League team. I think that is, as we've seen the last couple of years, they really are utilizing that, putting a lot of these young players down with the Stars for a couple games, especially with them having, they're adding another 4 picks this year. So odds are at least 2 or 3 of those guys are going to be spending a lot of time with the Stars just because there's not enough room on the main roster for everybody.
And with people I've talked to, one of the ways the Jazz designs their roster, specifically with the G League, and this could change year to year depending on what your main roster is doing with the Jazz, but they have liked to have players in place to not mimic exactly what the Jazz are doing, but to maybe eliminate some of the nonsense that has to be done. Nonsense is a vulgar word to use. Some of the other things that you have to do on an NBA court just to run an actual system, to actually play basketball. The Jazz like to bring in some guys to take care of some of that dirty work, the hard work, the other things. So when Cody Williams gets sent down, Cody Williams can just be Cody Williams. He doesn't have to weirdly run point guard because they don't have a ball handler. They have Jason Preston to do that. or he doesn't have to rebound a bunch and try and figure out how they're going to get offensive possessions because Oscar Tshiebwe is going to get 30 rebounds in a game and continue to generate offensive possessions to allow guys like Cody Williams or previously Bryce Sensabaugh or previously Taylor Hendricks to get a lot of reps that will mimic what they're actually trying to do in the NBA.
Yeah,
So,
Cody, go learn how to get to your spots. Go learn how to find your shot.
How
Isaiah
we're gonna
Collier,
use you.
Go learn how to run the offense.
Right. But it doesn't make sense to train him to do something in the G League that he's not going to be asked to do in the NBA.
Right.
So I think that is one of the ways the Jazz have designed their team. And you look at, the Micah Potters of the world. Now, he's certainly a different player than Lauri Markkanen, but he's also a big guy who can step out and spread the floor, who I don't know if the Jazz were designing. And if he was, great. And if he developed that way, great. But I don't know if they brought him in with the intention of being like, well, that's going to be the next face of the Jazz that we're going to build around. So much as, hey, he plays a really good role in the G League and he makes life easier for our other players and mimics NBA spacing so they can develop within that. And so I will be curious how they approach that with their team building this year, because when you're bringing in 4 more new young players, and Austin Ainge came on the station and said, the most likely outcome is the Jazz make these 4 draft picks. Now, you could draft a guy and stash him in Europe or Australia or wherever. But at least 2 rookies are coming over, maybe 3 or 4. They're going to spend time in the G League, inevitably. And I would imagine that the Jazz's 2 second-round picks, if they both come to the NBA next year, are probably on 2-way contracts, meaning they're going to be in the G League. And so that will be those will be 2 key players that Katie Benzan and the staff, including now Rick Higgins, the new head coach of the Stars, are going to have to build around. So anyways, big thanks to the Salt Lake City Stars for letting us talk to Katie Benzan. Big thanks to Katie for jumping on and giving us a breakdown on what her role is. And again, I think you're going to hear her name a lot, if not in Utah, around the NBA in general. But I would imagine the Jazz brought her in because they like her. And her background is certainly extraordinarily impressive. She played 3 years at Harvard before she transferred to Maryland, which Maryland is one of the premier women's basketball programs in the country, and then went on to play for the Washington Mystics in the WNBA. So thanks for Katie jumping on and the Stars setting that up. We will wrap up the show coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
So now Phil Steele's doing the, I've got 3 people tied at first place. Don't you love these? And he's got BYU and TCU tied for 7th.
Oh, BYU fan just drove off the freeway.
Very middle of the conference. Tied for first at the very top of the conference. Iowa State, Baylor, also tied at first. The University of Utah. I can't totally knock this list. The place where you're going to get the biggest flip, I think, is that TCU, Texas Tech, BYU middle of the conference.
I think that's exactly right. I think Texas Tech, TCU, BYU could finish 1, 2, 3.
Sure. Do you have a problem with him putting Utah at number 1?
Okay, what was the problem last year for the Utes? Was
Offense.
it their defense?
Nope, it was the offense.
No, their defense was amazing. Their offense, they had 7 rushing touchdowns total. Can Devin Dampier, with the same offensive coordinator he had success last year with, they were the 4th best offense in the country. At New Mexico.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us?
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Happy Tuesday to everybody out there. The segment's brought to you by Peach Doors and Windows. Amazing home transformations begin with Peach Doors and Windows, where 5-star reviews are the norm. Call them today for your free in-home estimate, 801-566-1255. Go check them out online, peachbuildingproducts.com. We do have a trade in the NBA during the break, and an interesting trade, particularly for 2 reasons. One, the Indiana Pacers are involved, which, if you've not been paying attention, they have other things going on. They are currently in the NBA Finals and facing elimination. But they are trading their first-round draft pick this year, owed to them via the Pascal Siakam trade. It's not actually their own pick, but they are trading it, the pick that they own, to the New Orleans Pelicans to get their own pick next year. So the Pacers own the 23rd pick in this year's draft. They are trading it to get the rights to their own pick back next season. And the Pelicans do this. Well, the Pacers do this so they don't have to add more salary to their roster this offseason, guaranteed. They're already going to be up against the salary tax, which are the salary cap and the luxury tax, which they don't like to pay by way of having to re-sign Miles Turner, which it looks like they're probably going to do. And rightfully so after making a championship run. But this now gives the Pelicans the 7th pick and the 23rd overall pick, which is somewhat coincidental and relevant to the Utah Jazz, who own the 5th pick and the 21st pick. Like, the Jazz have the better value of 5 and 21 is better than 7 and 23, but they're pretty similar. So I'm curious if the Pelicans did this with the idea of trying to add another draft pick to combine with 7 to move up in the draft. You're not doing it to move up to 6. You could potentially be doing it to move up to 5, though I don't know why the Jazz would want the 21st and 23rd overall picks, unless the Jazz were then going to in turn combine those to try and move up to 14 or 15, which is possible. But maybe they are doing this to try and jump the Jazz and move up to a number 4, where, and again, that's why I tell you it's lying season. That's why I tell you not to believe anything you hear about Ace Bailey having bad workouts or anything like that. But maybe the Charlotte Hornets are willing to move back to 7 because they feel like, and again, this is all speculation, the guy they want actually in the draft is going to be there at 7, and they don't care about the guy who's at 4 or 5 or 6. They know the guy they want is going to be there at the 7, and they're willing to move back to get him and might as well pick up another draft asset. Or the Pelicans think Ace Bailey's going to fall in the draft. He's not going to go number 3 overall, and he's not getting past 5 with the Utah Jazz or Washington at 6, so we got to move up to 4 to get him. Or that could be VJ Edgecombe, or that could be Con Knipple, or that could be Trey Johnson. Could be any one of these guys. But it's an interesting time to make this trade for the Pelicans, adding another draft pick that could conceivably, potentially give them ammunition to jump the Jazz in the draft.
You typically don't see trading into the 20s outside of draft night, right? Normally that's a trade that will happen in the middle of the draft. So for a team to do it before...
Or the middle of the season.
Right.
You don't do it a week before the draft unless there's like a real plan.
Right. So to your point, this does seem like, maybe New Orleans is trying to package something to move up. But who knows? Maybe they do just want an extra pick in the 20s this year for free.
Maybe there's a guy that they see and they say, hey, we think the Pacers are going to be good in the East next year. Right now, this is the 23rd pick. Next year, we're projecting that to be the 26th pick, so why not just have a better pick this year? That's possible. And maybe the right move. I think this is the first move of something else for the Pelicans.
Yeah.
Would be my guess.
When you talk about, everybody says the players in the 3 to 5, 3 to 7 range are very, very close.
Yeah.
If there's a guy that the Pelicans really, really like and they are worried about the Hornets, the Jazz, the Wizards, get out ahead of them.
Yep. And that is kind of how people are viewing this. The draft is separated by teams in tiers. So Cooper Flagg will be in a tier of his own. Most teams will have Dylan Harper at number 2 in a tier of his own. And then the next tier will be VJ Edgecombe, Ace Bailey, Trey Johnson, Con Knipple, maybe Jeremiah Fierce. But what's interesting is that gets you from about 3, 4, 5, and 6, maybe 7, depending on who else you would drop into that group, which would put the Pelicans at the very back end of that group at number 7 with the chance to move into a little bit higher because they don't want to just take, Jeremiah Fierce or Derek Queen fell to us. We want to jump up and get somebody else. Anyways, this is that time of year for all these teams, and it's why you've got to keep an eye on where the Utah Jazz are sitting at number 5 overall. Join Hans and Scotty on Friday from noon to 3 at Bar W Beef, the new state-of-the-art retail butcher shop supporting Utah farmers and ethical farming practices, all at supermarket prices. That's Bar W Beef, only in Nephi, coming up on Friday with Hans and Scotty. Christian, big thanks for all your help as always, but really over the last 7 shows without Jake. Jake is expected to be back next week, assuming flights work out well. What did I say, next week? I mean tomorrow. He's going to be back tomorrow, assuming his flight works out. So excited to have Jake back. Appreciate everybody who has stepped in and filled in and helped out. While Jake's been out, the show will feel somewhat back to normal tomorrow when we return. Hans and Scotty coming up next, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.